And we're probably live now.
Oh,
It's always
okay.
like partway through the upload process that
Okay.
we're actually live. We're like, ooh, I can hear some background yelling.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just make sure the door's closed.
Yeah. Okay. So Dave is off quieting his
Guys,
kid. We
can't hear you,
get to
Squeaky.
talk about this movie
Okay,
called
sorry.
Yee today. I hope people take a chance to go and watch it. It's actually on the Criterion channel. So if people want to go and watch it, it is fairly easy to find it on that platform. Just telling our people that are watching about how to find Yee. By the way, do you know if I'm saying that right? Is it
Yeah,
Yee or
yee, yeah. Yeah,
E or
it's
something?
the yee. That's the number one.
Actually, it's the number 1 and 2.
No, yee is
Hence,
one.
right? I know, but the
Can we do
actual name
this?
for this movie is a 1 and a 2. That is the actual name of this movie.
Well,
I read up
depends who you ask.
on the symbol here.
Depends who you ask, because
Oh,
Helen did not pick up on that at all. And she looked at me. She's like, "Why is this called yee?" And I was like, well, I just said 1 and 2." She's like, "Doesn't make sense." I'm like, "Okay, sorry."
that's we'll talk about it in the episode because that's honestly just me watching video essays about why he named it the way that he
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I'm not discounting that. It's just funny watching it. If anybody actually watches this, my wife is Taiwanese, and so
mhm.
again with the rich and what do we call it? The rich and deep fiction.
Yes, that
I
we've
watched
done,
this with you in a room,
but
but
also with your wife.
I also watched it with my wife, who's giving me some side commentary while
Mm.
getting bored in the first third of it. Well, we'll talk about that too. I'm ready for a link. Do you want me to tweet a
Oh,
link
right,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah. Jeez, Louise.
no? It's
Uh,
it's fine. You just do it by yourself and do your own
yeah.
thing. I'm just here for window dressing. I get
So
it.
this is the
Just make
link
sure it's actually
there.
picking picking up my voice in this condenser mic. Yeah, that seems better. Although I had one where it peaked a bit. That's okay. Oh no, how come I can't copy the link? Oh, here it is. Okay, copy,
Oh.
paste, and what's happening here? I'll tell you what's happening. I'm about to fleet it. What's the point of fleeting? Anybody actually know?
Dave, there is no point. Stop thinking that there's a point. None of
Live
it matters.
streaming.
All of it is stupid.
I think you've been hanging out with me too long. You're becoming very cynical. What happened to the Kyle that actually believed in things, in life, and joy? About
You killed him, Dave.
yeah. Oh, I almost wrote yo-yo. Fuck. Then I'd hear it from cancel culture.
That's a movie right there.
All right. All right. Tweeted it.
Okay,
Okay.
so let's do our intro, our cold open, so to speak. So as we mentioned before we started recording, I'm going to be hunched over a computer, looking like I'm freaking out.
Yeah. I'm going to be staring at this to make sure I'm not peeking. Okay. Oh. Oh, the loud voice is not good.
Oh, okay. Well,
It didn't go red, but that was a big jump. Okay. And the other thing is I'm getting very agitated, Kyle. This is going to be an exciting episode.
Why are you getting agitated?
All right. Oh, yeah.
I'm typing.
Kyle, what are you doing? Is that a computer? And why are you hunched over?
Oh my God, Dave, I am freaking out over here. We are trying to get home. We're on this stupid spaceship, and it can't go unless I type in the passcode that it's asking for. It's like I'm being locked out of an iPad that has just been given to me, and I have no backstory towards it. All right. Hey, do you have time for like an Aaron Sorkin walk and talk?
Yeah. Although I also have this thought: do we want to leave? We're watching pretty good movies here. I kind of
I
like.
assumed that you wanted to get back to your family, but I mean, if
Yeah,
you,
they're okay, but we watched Godfather in Spirited
yeah,
Away. What's coming
okay.
next? We'll talk about it.
We're talking about it this week. Here,
All
come
right,
with me.
let's go for a walk.
Just imagine that this is like super cinematic and it looks super freaking awesome. Just have that in the back of your head. Okay, So over the last week, the computer was telling me all these different things that it could do for us. And now, sorry, the machine has been telling me all these things that it wants to do for us. But first, we need to log into this computer system on the ship. However, the machine's not being very forthcoming with what I need to do. All all it has is like the 4-digit passcode here, and it's like the next year we're going to talk about. That is the only hint that it's giving to me. Do you have any idea what we should be typing into there?
We could try my passcode. It's 1, 2,
2.
3, 4.
All right, let's go back here. Let's walk back. Ah, damn it.
Ah,
I have only 3 more tries left.
ah. And you
You
know what?
idiot.
I bet this is going to be a 2-factor authorization.
Where's that getting sent to? All right. Let me get into this.
Oh,
Welcome to yeah,
just
yeah.
quickly, Helen
Mhm.
did answer some of the questions. She didn't
Okay.
record them. I forgot to go over this with you. So
Okay, well,
I'll
you have them at the ready.
yeah.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. My name is Kyle.
And I'm still Dave.
A podcast where a sentient machine is forcing us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse. Although now it's just, trying to get back home. We do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. And currently, due to some technical difficulties, we're stuck in this small circular room that is the bridge of a large spaceship, and I'm trying to get back to Earth. Meanwhile, though, we get to talk about a movie called Yee Yee.
Yee yee.
Once again, a big thank you to our Patreon. Oh my God. Once again, a big thank you to our patron Green Girl YYC, who is holding down the fort, so to speak, over on our Patreon page. So thank you so much for your generous support. Dave, I think where we need to start off in our discussion here is just talking a little bit about maybe our history with Asian cinema as a whole. But if you have any backstory with this movie too, I'd love to hear it.
No backstory. Asian cinema, I have a deep and rich. Is that what we're doing for our fiction? I have a
Yeah, it's
deep
deep and
and
rich.
rich history.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I think this is sort of ambi-racist, or I don't know what the right
Okay.
word is, but Asian people like Asian movies. So I think and I did some backstory digging about Taiwan, but the big influence for people of my generation is, of course, the birth of Hong Kong
Mm-hmm.
cinema, and we can talk about maybe kung fu genre and sort of campy stuff leading into gangster dramas into the 90s, and of course the art house stuff with Wong Kar-wai. So there's a big generating theme. Sorry, there's a big growing movement in Hong Kong with some just really fantastic movies.
Well, doing some research this week, knowing that this was the movie we were going to be talking about, I tried my best to kind of get a bit of a handle on Taiwanese cinema.
Mm.
And from what I could tell, again, I have no idea, don't live there, do not have like a deep knowledge of their cinema, but it sounds like they're at this like center point of being influenced by Western media and Japan specifically. And that is kind of like the overlap of what Taiwan is. When you look or delve into it a little bit more, you can see deep, what's the right word? I don't know, deep influences, the deep influence that things like Ozu and Kurosawa have on them, but also wrapped up in like shots and stuff that are from Western style directors. So it's a kind of an interesting, confluence of those influences.
All of Asia has a lot of complex relationships. First of all, with Japan, which was a
Yeah.
brutal colonizer, and then Taiwan is a particular counter-cultural influence with mainland China. So I think what I've read is the film industry there started, in the 1900s, like all cinema.
Yeah.
But this thing called New Wave Taiwanese cinema comes at a time where they're trying to develop a Taiwanese cultural identity. Not that they didn't have one, but to express it in medium. So that's probably mid late 70s or something like that to the 80s.
Yeah, late 70s, early 80s, it seems like that's when the new wave Taiwanese cinema started.
So I'm not surprised that by then, we've got Japanese films and filmmakers coming out of the 50s that have blazed the trail that will get influential status, that wouldn't have gotten in probably in the 30s and 40s, where it might have been a blacklist to even watch Japanese films. At that point,
Right.
it's quite tense. Um, and American cinema has influenced everything. Apparently, one of the reasons I think implied that we neither of us have even heard of Yi Yi is that the American influence and pirating movies became so prominent in the late 90s that Taiwanese cinema like collapsed. This might be the
Oh.
last prominent Taiwanese film until Ang Lee blew up the scene again, like in the mid 2000s. But
Is Ang Lee from Taiwan?
yeah, Ang
Oh, I
Lee's
didn't know that.
Taiwanese. Yeah,
For some reason, I
mind.
thought he was Chinese, so that's why.
Racist, awful.
Yeah.
No, so he's Taiwanese, and we know him in America because of all the American movies. Unfortunately, the Hulk, but he's apparently made a lot of very important films in Taiwan to bring back, I guess, what do they call it? Second generation new wave. But
Mhm.
these guys that we're talking about, Edward Yang, and the star of this movie, I can't
Is a
pronounce his name.
writer, I think, as well. He's written a bunch of films. The
He's
star, I
apparently
mean,
like,
yeah.
yeah, he's like doesn't act. He's part of this new wave founding group. He's a director who's also won some big awards in Venice or
Right.
something, and he's considered one of the great screenwriters of Taiwanese media. But again, we're not Taiwanese. We don't know who
Right.
these people are. I married into a Taiwanese family. They're very unique. They don't like being called Chinese, and
No, sure.
uh, like little nuance, for example, and I don't really have a right to say this, but they speak Mandarin, but it's not the same Mandarin as mainland China.
Got you.
They're,
Okay.
I mean, it's Mandarin, but when Chinese became communist China, they simplified it and created a state version of the language with its own nuanced pronunciation, some of the words, whereas the Taiwanese use something called traditional Chinese, which is Mandarin that, is generational.
I think that is, I mean, not the same thing historically, but just as a language, it is the huge difference between like French from France and French from Quebec.
Right.
Those are two very different things.
Yeah. And uh, with, I don't know if it has the same amount of animosity, but
Right, I know. That's what I mean. Like,
it's an interesting, yeah, it's just an interesting thing. I made a lot of uh, mistakes when we first started dating about mixing things up. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, when I was in my teens, because all the best toys came from Taiwan, I thought Taiwan was a Japanese city because all of the coolest toys were made in Taiwan, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
Transformers and all this stuff, and they're all Japanese TV shows. But I'm an idiot. Um, yeah, so it was kind of fascinating to learn a little bit about these people. Unfortunately, in Western Wikipedia, there's not a lot of information about them
Yeah, that's
individually.
the
So
yeah. You have to really dig, and at least for me, watching a bunch of YouTube videos, that was basically me trying to figure out a little bit more from this because Ang Lee really is my entry point into any type of Asian cinema of really any kind. Definitely, I'd seen some of his like English language films, but and I know that you have you don't really like the movie all that much. But Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was like this huge touch point for me to be like, oh, this stuff is cool. Like I really loved that movie so much that made me want to explore more of that stuff, and really is what got me into um, wanting to actually see the stuff from Jackie Chan, like his written and directed stuff in China. Of course, he was in like Rush Hour and stuff, and I knew him from that. But I mean, I wanted to see more of that type of stuff, and that really got me into Japanese cinema. So like he was really the entry point, and then I kind of started to branch out from there. Had you heard about this movie at all before the machine asked us to talk about it?
nope. I think the first time we heard about it in this deep and rich fiction is when the robot told us about it, but
Yeah.
the machine. But you and I saw some top 100 movies list a couple of months ago, and we're
Mhm.
like, "What? How is this even?" I've never
Right.
heard of this movie. but it's
And one that was in
considered,
literally the top 10, like it is
yeah, it's like
in the top
considered
10
one of the
films. Yeah.
great films of history amongst that peer group, of course. Um, so it is fascinating. I don't think I've even watched, other than Ang Lee, I don't think I've ever watched a Taiwanese movie.
Right.
They're very specific, and they have a bit of a propagandic culture, right? I mean, there's a very strong identity to all of the work. I mean, we'll see if this movie represents that too, but it'll be
Sorry, you're
interesting.
saying that Taiwan has that or China
Yeah,
has that?
well, all Asian countries have that.
Okay.
This is what we call, I think it's called new wave Korean cinema, is the same thing. If you ever watch Korean movies from like the 90s, they're fucking awful, and B, they're so focused on trying to define what it means to be a good South Korean person because they're
Mm.
under so many counterculture influences from America, North Korea, China, Japan, etc. You find that everywhere in Asia. They're so close together, and there are a couple of superpowers that differentiating themselves and how they live their daily life is very, very important. Whereas North America is a bit of a melting pot. Like we discussed actually in our secret episode on Existence how weird Canadian cinema actually is.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think there's a reason because it's not just maple syrup and beaver tails here. Like
No, but Canadian cinema is also very often very intentionally trying not to be Hollywood,
right,
right?
but
And
for
I
a
think
reason
that
because
right.
we don't want to be American. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's always the struggle with Canadian literature as well. It's like, what is Canadian lit? Like, does it have to be set in Canada, or does it just have to be written by someone who lives in Canada? A
right.
lot of our great authors uh, uh, are immigrants into Canada. Like, they were not necessarily born here; they actually emigrated here. So, like, how do we consider what is Canadian and what isn't? And I think Taiwan maybe has something similar in that. I will only say, before we go into our break, that Edward Yang's it's Edward Yang, right? Did I say
Yeah,
that right?
yeah.
Edward Yang's other two films I know better only by name. I've
Mm.
never watched them, but I've heard of A Brighter Summer Day and I've heard of Taipei Story. But I actually had never heard of this movie whatsoever until, again, the machine told us that we should talk about it. Luckily, all three of them are available on Criterion Channel. So if you have access to that, then you should go and check them out.
I just read, and maybe we'll look at this together, Kyle. That what was the one you called? Happy whatever.
A Brighter Summer Day is 4 hours long.
4 hours.
It's
But
four
apparently
hours.
that's his magnum opus. So we
Yes.
might need to look at it if we ever get out of this box.
Right.
Quick note, just because I'll shout out my wonderful wife. She didn't really get this, but I read that book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, and they trace Polynesian heritage to the island of Taiwan. It's
What does
fascinating.
that mean? What does that mean?
So there are visual. So I used to joke that she might be Samoan, but it turns out the opposite is true. That all of those Polynesian islands, if you look at their genealogy, they actually root from the island, not from China, but from the island of Taiwan. And
Oh,
so
okay.
they have a very strong case to protect their national identity. It is actually quite a crucial link in human genealogy, apparently. And
Hmm.
like, so we did a DNA test, and it's fascinating because we are in no way related. Like, whereas
Well,
I'm
that's
like,
good.
what I mean is like I'm apparently I have like 10% of a Japanese genome, and there are, I mean, that's why Koreans and Japanese don't get along. There's a lot of contention on who comes
Sure,
from
sure.
where. If you look at Manchurians or even the Inuit people, they share a lot of similarities with Koreans and with
Hmm.
Japanese. But Taiwanese has a very unique genome, and I think it's like particularly indigenous Chinese, which my wife's family is. They're
Right, right.
Hokanese or whatever it is. So um, there's so much to learn, Kyle. You got to get out of our
Apparently.
box, man. Yeah.
Get out of your box. All right. Well, I'm going to get out of my box for just a moment and go and thank some of our sponsors. And so when we return, can you believe we're still getting sponsors, by the way, while we're up here in this spaceship? The Alberta Podcast Network still sends me stuff via email that I have to read each and every episode as we send these off.
Alberta strong, man.
Yeah, Alberta proud, man. That has a really bad connotation
No,
nowadays.
yeah.
Anyways, I'm going to go thank some sponsors. And then when we return, we'll be talking a little bit more about this movie called Yi Yi. All right, Dave. Well, that was 3 hours that we just spent watching the lives of a single family in Taiwan. I guess in our non-spoilery section here. What are your immediate thoughts?
Um, I think metaphorically, it reminded me of when I went camping and I stared at a fire. There's something so meditative, but
That's a great,
seeming
yeah, that's a
right.
great analogy. Yes.
I couldn't I couldn't turn away, but it is not exciting in a right blockbuster explosion ninjas, bloodletting drama. It's just it was fascinating. The payoff for sure at the end is worth it, but it is a bit of a drag to get into, particularly because I think you and I don't understand anything about Taiwanese living. So this is like what I don't know. What would you guess the time span? Like 15 days or 2 months in the life of a
I
Taiwanese
actually don't
family?
even know. I don't even know if it gives you enough context clues. I was like,
Yeah,
is this a year? Is this a couple, yeah, a few days, like a week or so? Is this like
one
5 months?
season maybe. Yeah.
Like, I don't actually know how long this movie actually encompasses necessarily.
But it's great. I found myself very emotional at the end, just because it is fairly impactful the way that everything kind of finally gels together. So I thought it
It's
was great.
yeah, it sneaks up on you. You make fun of me a little bit about like loving Marvel superhero movies, which I do, but I find that actually the movies that are like the deepest things that connect with me are this type of cinema where it is meditative. Like one of my favorite films of all time of like the last whatever decade uh was Boyhood. And Boyhood is very similar. It's like I'm watching one person over 3 hours and not really anything happens in that movie. Like not really, and yet I love it. By the end of it, I'm so emotional because, like, boy, I've actually watched this kid grow up over 9 years. That's amazing. And then similarly in this one, it's like I'm just watching a family all kind of interact with relationships in different ways over, let's just say, a couple weeks. But it's like all of their like little stories that do all combine into one thing eventually. And I think a part of what makes this film work so much is that Edward Yang very intentionally, and this apparently is something from that new wave style, which is like he just sets his camera up and kind of just lets things run. He lets the movement of the people be the movement that we're seeing in the movie. He like very rarely ever moves the camera. When he does, it's like literally either like a pan to the left and then it just stays there again, or it might be like a tilt upwards or something like that, and again just stays there for us to like take in the scene. And as such, it just really feels like I am literally here in this moment, a lot seeing what is going on with these people. What that allows them to do is it really feels like I'm seeing these intimate moments. Like you see the dad like singing to himself while he's listening to his Walkman, and or like the little boy who's like practicing holding his breath by like holding his head under like the sink water or whatever it happens to be. Um, uh, I will say this in that this is all the reverse of the original Godfather to me. We talked about Godfather 2 last week, but because I rewatched The Godfather in preparation for that movie, it's like I'm totally in that movie from like frame one up until like the last 30 minutes, which I feel kind of loses me a little bit. Still a great movie. This is the exact opposite. I was like, I don't know for like the first like 30, 40 minutes, and then it was totally great for the rest of it. And like the rest of like the like that next 2 hours and 20 minutes is like I'm totally in this entire movie. Like I want to know what happens, sort of thing. So it's like the inverse of both of those films. Weirdly, both start off with a wedding. So who knows what if there's any other similarities. But yeah, overall, I think that it has like a lot to say about like the human condition and all that kind of stuff. But I kind of just like you said, like a fire, I'm just entranced and I like just being a part of that world for a bit. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie overall.
I didn't verify this, but what struck me is I don't think that there's a musical score underneath. I had this
Mm,
sense by the end that again, this is why I had the fire analogy, that underneath, like even in the dramatic moments or the build-up at the end, it's not like you have this big orchestra coming in the back to cue you to understand that you should be crying or that this is a
mhm.
moment of suspense or violence. Um, as you brought up, it's like it almost. And again, I didn't actually Google this, but it feels like intentionally the sounds that are happening from the action are what make this so vivid. So, everything from even the nuances of using, let's say, the TV news reports or whatever is in the background audio to be, or the movies, it's all part of the experience of what these characters are experiencing.
Hmm.
But there are also foreshadowing and like leading clues that push the narrative a little bit to let you know what to expect. So by the end, I don't know, it was, well, I don't know, can we talk about that little quip in the middle of the movie? You live three lives. I feel like I got to be a part of a Taiwanese family
Hmm.
for 3 hours.
Well, yeah, there's that, but there's also very early in the movie. I think it's the son and the dad are in the car, and he's like, "Isn't it
Oh yeah.
weird how like I'll never be able to see what you see, and you'll never be able to see what I see?" And of course, he does like the typical dad thing. He's like, "Whatever, whatever," and like he like hand waves it away and keeps driving his car. But it's like
No, that's not what he did.
that's it.
He
That's it.
acknowledged it. Did you see him smiling? Like he sees that his son is wise. It's beautiful. I don't know. We don't want. I don't know. Are we spoiling it or should
No,
we?
I mean the last thing I just wanted to say, I don't think it's entirely subtle what's happening. I think it's very obvious that they are comparing and contrasting different family members against one another at different stages of their life. You're seeing the dad reignite an old flame, sort of, while at the same time his daughter is having like her first boyfriend crush thing that's happening. Um, and you see that all over the place. But what they also do, which I loved, is that he uses reflection a lot of the
Oh,
time, where it's like
those shots are so beautiful,
he
man.
sits on a window's reflection of the action that's actually happening or shooting through a window. So it's like we're really seeing again what that kid is saying at the very beginning, which is like at certain times of the day, a window is something you can see through, and other times it's a mirror that's only reflecting back at you. And again, I don't think that's like a subtle thing that the filmmaker is trying to sneak by us, but it's like a really cool technique that he's utilizing throughout the entire movie to use reflection versus being seen through a window at different times.
That's like auteur level stuff.
I don't know.
What the again? I don't think it's spoiling, but I mean, this is clearly a. I mean, the photographs. So this is clearly a. I don't know who did the cinematography or whether this is in fact the director, but this is someone who has full control of what light does through a camera lens, etc. And so the one that I really made impact, other than some of the reflections, when he flips the blinds closed and it becomes the mirror of the city.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
fuck, I was like, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
This Edward guy's got it. You know. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like he knows exactly where to put his camera, because there's moments where it's just like it's a street, but then like the daughter someone will come in and she like is standing like center frame, and then someone else enters and like all their stuff happening around them, but they're like perfectly
Well, the
enclosed in the middle of
lights.
the frame, and the lights are flicking around. In fact, I don't know. Again, this is another thing. I have no idea if this is like a happy accident or they were somehow able to cue the lights
I know the red
properly,
light to the
the
green.
red, green, and the
Oh,
blink, because it's like as soon as he says yes, it turns green, and then when she's a little bit sad, it turns red. I'm like, that
yes.
feels like this is timed, but I don't know if that's actually been timed.
I
Or
got a
he
sense.
or he sat there at that intersection being like, how much do I have to get them to say before I can flip the light on?
That's what I
Or
got the
right.
sense at the end. I was like,
Yeah.
this might have been the 10th take. They
Right.
know they have 45 seconds, but we don't know. We
I
weren't
have no
there.
idea. No
But that's
idea.
what it's so perfect. Those little new, especially as it builds to the end, you start really. I mean, if we ever were to sit down for another 3 hours to watch this from the beginning, it might have been there from the beginning.
I say we make it like a New Year's Eve tradition. We just watch this for 3 hours.
You know, I don't know. I'm not going to say no because 3 hours is a lot of my life. But what else am
Yeah.
I doing with it, Kyle? Mostly spending my time
You're
with
doing
you.
those
So
fleets, aren't you? Aren't you trying to figure out what fleets are?
fleeting it. It's
Yeah.
my hashtag fleet.
Um, well, let's get into some backstory here. So, Yi was released May 14th, 2000 at Cannes. That was where its like world debut happened. It would then go out to a bunch of film festivals. I could not find like conclusively when this was actually released into like wide release. I don't even know if this had a wide release in North America, but you could go and see it at a bunch of film festivals in October of 2000 in North America. And I think it says in Canada there was a December
A,
2000 release of this movie too.
a
So
TIFF maybe. Actually, no,
TIFF
December's too
maybe,
late.
probably.
Yeah, maybe
But
it's October.
regardless, it did come out into theaters. Currently, it is rated 8.2 on IMDb. It has a 93 on Metacritic. And then on Rotten Tomatoes, from 86 critics, it has a 97%. And from 7,652 users on Rotten Tomatoes, it's at a 91%. That's pretty low for users on Rotten Tomatoes, I will say. Like a number of users, that's pretty small, but still rated at 91%. It is available on DVD. It is available on DVD and Blu-ray. And currently, at least in North America, the only way to stream this is on the Criterion channel.
And
It's not able to be bought or rented on other platforms.
this is why there's no user reviews.
Maybe.
Like many things that we're trying to find now, nothing is available for X, Y, Z reason. It's a little
I will say
frustrating
though,
at this point.
yeah, I will say, like, if you are like a film snob fan, then the Criterion channel is kind of a steal of a deal. Like, it gives you so much stuff that gets kind of refreshed on a monthly basis, but there's some things that stay on there. Basically, all of Japanese cinema is available to you if you want to go and watch it.
Not that I want to break our possibility of a Criterion sponsorship, but Criterion, fix your UI, man.
Well, that is also true. The UI is pretty terrible, but the content
Beautiful.
is great.
Yeah, great.
I have no information on its budget, its opening, or how much money it made. I know that it made in North America like $1.8 million, which is pretty low for any type of release in North America. So that is probably playing at like a very small number of theaters. But yeah, I don't really know if this was considered a success monetarily.
This this feels a lot like Canadian cinema in that it's probably government funded and very art house, kind of like for festival circuit stuff. This doesn't seem to me to be a movie with worldwide distribution appeal. So it is something like many great films that is being scored on its own merits rather than, its popularity. And
Right.
Even if this was released in North America, I don't think North American audiences could appreciate it. Not the American audiences that need a trailer to spoil an ending, you fucking idiots, just to go and shell out money to go see a movie, right? It is weird statistically to think about why that's happening as a marketing tool.
Yeah.
Who is out there that needs that much encouragement to watch a goddamn movie? Just go and watch it.
Just watch it, man.
Just watch it, man.
Its plot description from IMDb is: each member of a middle-class Taipei family seeks to reconcile past and present relationships within their daily lives. But that's true. That is what this movie's about.
Yep.
It stars Nian Wu as NJ, Issei Ogata as Mr. Ota, Suyun Ko as Sherry, Kelly Lee as Ting Ting, and Jonathan Chang as Yang Yang. We already mentioned Nian Wu is the other person who is considered one of those like new wave filmmakers. The two kids, like the teenage daughter that is in this movie, this is the only movie she ever made, and I'm actually pretty shocked at that she never came back, because she does actually a pretty great performance. The young kid, Yang Yang, I think made 4 or 5 other films, but hasn't made anything since 2012. And then Mr. Ota and Sherry have extensive careers since this movie in a bunch of different projects. So anything else you want to say, I guess, about any of those actors?
No, I think the only thing that I thought was interesting, so Asian, is that Edward Yang and Wu Nianzhen were like trained engineers and stuff before they got to go into cinema, because that's an Asian standard.
Let me get into this. So this is, of course, written and directed by Edward Yang. He always wanted to become a filmmaker. That's kind of his background. Wanted to become a filmmaker. So he decides, that's what I'm going to do. And he goes to USC Film School. I should have checked this, where USC Film School is. Anyways, goes to this film school and drops out, I think, after 1 or 2 semesters, because he became so disenchanted that their focus was on the commerce of filmmaking rather than the art of filmmaking. So like you said, yes, he goes and becomes an engineer. That's what he does. He gets a degree in engineering and was working in like microcomputers and like defense software is what he was working on, where he, by accident, do you know what movie he saw by accident?
Yeah, a Werner
Werner
Herzog.
Herzog. Yeah, Aguera, The Wrath of God, which is a great movie, by the way. If you've never seen Aguera, it's also on the Criterion channel, so you can go and check that out.
Such a
So
Werner Herzog title, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it is. I love Werner Herzog so much. Like the guy is so fun. He's on the first season of The Mandalorian. If you want to go check out Werner
That's
Herzog,
right.
but
Yeah.
anyway, so he sees this film and he's like, "Oh my gosh! Like movies can be more than just commerce. They can be all this stuff." So he basically does this crash course from that point on of like world cinema, is what he called it. So all these different directors and to see what was possible. So then he decides, I'm going to go back into filmmaking. And as we mentioned, it becomes this one of the founding members of Taiwanese New Wave. Uh, and some of his other films before this were Taipei Story and A Bright Summer Day. Um, but he was kind of just becoming known to the world, like because of those two films and this film in particular. Because even at the time in 2000, film critics and like peers were saying like this is like great, like this is a perfect encapsulation of what can happen in world cinema, and like this is one of the new masters that we should be following. Unfortunately, this would be his last feature film that he ever made because he would pass away in 2007 to colon cancer. So like just literally as he was becoming like this world renowned film director, he passes away. But he does leave that he still left us like this huge body of work that we can still go. But it would still be interesting to see what Edward Yang would be doing in present day if he was still alive.
I mean, not to be a downer, but it is interesting looking at some of the directors we've looked at. So, for example, I had a very Stanley Kubrick and Francis Ford Coppola feeling at the first half an hour of this movie. It's so like so deliberate, so saturated, so
Mm-hmm.
intentional, and neither of them held up through generational movie telling. There's something
Sure.
very necessary and specific about the experience that they're depicting in film of that era, but to compete with, again, who I just snidely hated on, the movie market, the commercial movie market, and how you get funding for this stuff. I don't know how you stay relevant. Um,
I think he would have directed like Iron Man 2, obviously.
they would have asked, and he
It
would
would
have
have been
said,
four
"Well,
and a half hours of him just like staring at his suit and be like, "Can I do this anymore?"
it's not Hamlet. It's not Hamlet."
Right.
But yeah, but yeah, I mean, look at Ang Lee. He blew up and he's disappeared.
Well, he hasn't disappeared, but he's, as he himself has admitted, he has become so focused that high frame rate is going to be the future of cinema. That's what he's been focusing on for his last three movies that have all been kind of terrible. But yes, I get your point. I cede your point, is what I should say.
Yeah, it's tragic though that he passed away, and we
Mhm.
couldn't actually. This has to be hypothetical because, yeah, it's nice to imagine that people that can build art like this
Mhm.
um, could might potentially have staying power.
Right,
He would have definitely, I think, been named in the pantheon of auteurs, but
for sure.
nobody knows who any of these Taiwanese directors are, which is a bit of a
It
tragedy,
was
I
a
think.
bummer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's open this conversation up then so that we can spoil things. Although, to be perfectly frank, I don't know how much this movie can be spoiled, except for like one thing, which I kind of wish I had not read the plot description that Criterion uses for this movie,
Oh.
because they spoil the fact that the grandmother dies at the
Oh.
end, and I
Oh, that
didn't
sucks.
know. And
Okay.
so, because I knew that was coming, I was like, I think I would have liked it had that been a question that was being raised, like, is she going to wake up,
Yeah,
type of
that's
thing.
well. I got to watch it
Anyways,
purely. Yeah, that's
yeah.
good. So I win again, Kyle, because
Yes,
I
you and
got to
again.
watch it. No,
Now, nicely enough,
oh,
because the machine has allowed us to stay in contact with friends and family members, we can FaceTime. We have the of course the not projector. What do they call those? Hologram. We have hologram
hologram. Yeah,
technology
hologram.
on this spaceship here. So you were talking with your wife, and I sent some questions to you to ask her. I don't know if you can break down some of this, because one of the things that I was mostly curious about, I said that this starts off with a wedding, and what I was like curious about, like, is this not that well, it matters and it doesn't matter at the same time. Is like Taiwan a Christian focused religion? Not, well, like Taiwan is not a religion, but like, is Christianity like the number one religion there? Is that what even that wedding was? Like, I was trying to like ascertain that, and coupled with like their focus on luck and lucky days and stuff. So I was trying to parse that. And being an outsider, I was like, I don't know if I totally understand what's going on.
Generally in East Asia, Christianity does not have a foothold.
Yeah.
So they've come in through missionaries, and Korea is susceptible to cults. There's a lot of Christianity in Korea, but for the most part, Asian countries have their own unique approaches, but they generally revolve around some Buddhist structure, with the exception of Japan, which has Buddhism and Shinto. If you want, we could talk about that, but
I would be this. It would be you telling me, because I have literally I don't know anything about Shinto or Buddhism really,
so I don't know if
other
we're
than I'm
gonna.
trying to reach nirvana and something about the bodhisattva and blah blah blah. I took a
Well, there's
Buddhism course in university, so I know like words, but that's about it.
yeah, Shinto's. If we want to understand why Japanese people have a very unique view of the world and their place in it, we
Mhm.
should read up on Shinto religion and all of their really interesting religious beliefs. But now, I don't know if we're going to cut this in as Helen interrupting me, but she says that her grandma on her mom's side was Buddhist, but her dad's side, and there's some drama there, they were raised Catholic.
Mm.
And so her family is very, and I can attest to this, very non-religious. She is very unique. This might be why she's been able to put up with me for 20 years. She has no grounding in religion at all. Like,
Okay.
she's never even been in a church. It's fascinating. She has been to a Buddhist camp and a temple before, but
Hmm.
not in any kind of regularity. Um, she would say that, in her estimation, Buddhism is the most prevalent religion in Taiwan. And Buddhism as religion itself is very nuanced. There's a lot of different
Yeah.
versions. So, yeah, I think what you were witnessing is a very Chinese ceremony. So I've been to Chinese weddings. That is what a Chinese wedding looks like, even outside of spiritual norms. You just have the color palettes, you have large banquet tables, you have gifts, you have drunken people throwing up on each other. It's just, the thing is less religious, I think, than cultural. And I think that is just a quote unquote Chinese Asian
Gotcha.
wedding. Yeah.
So the brother-in-law that is like he wants the birth of his son to be on a specific day. He waited to be married on a very specific day. Is that a Buddhism thing, or is that just a character thing of
No,
that
that's a
character?
that's a Chinese thing across
Okay.
all Chinese culture. Koreans are a little bit less than this, but any Asian culture that follows lunar calendars is so superstitious. It's actually kind of a bit of a pantomime.
Hmm.
Um, so Helen says, culturally, lucky days are definitely a thing. So her anecdote is that her mom actually has a separate calendar, which tells you, much like in the movie, which day is suitable for what. So there are good days for births. There are good days for weddings. There's a good day to open a business and to have a
Mm,
funeral. Not everyone is obsessed with it, but she says there's even a spectrum on how much luck you might have on a day. Um,
gotcha.
but people will actually intentionally defer events to land on a lucky day. We
You know
we know this
the
even with Emerson. There was talk about how to name him, what time is he born, on what day. Like,
oh
people are
boy.
associated with fate with that stuff.
Well, so my only background of that, when I used to sell cell phones, is that there was a feature on many of the carriers' websites that were, and that's what they called it back then. So this might be a little bit racist now, but it was Chinese numbers is what you could select from. Uh, so basically, there are certain numbers that maybe Chinese customers would not want to have in their phone number.
Yep.
So you could just
Yep.
yeah, here is a list of numbers that is available that don't have any of the unlucky numbers inside of them.
That comes from, you must, I don't know, I'm assuming you might know this, but Chinese is one of the few languages that does not use an alphabetic system. So everything is symbols.
Right.
Is a fascinating language that has persisted and been so prevalent. And one of the side effects, or one of the nuance of that, is that some of the characters are shared with other words. So 4 is written the same way you say death. And there are,
Right. Yes.
and I
Yeah.
think 8 is luck. And there's all these nuanced things that come together. We do have stuff like that in English, but I couldn't name them offhand because, with an alphabetic system, you can change the spelling or create an
Well, there's
intonation.
what they call homonyms, so words that sound
Sure.
the same but are spelled different, and sometimes have vastly different meanings.
Right.
Um, one of the just bringing up that point, something we were talking about before we push record, but apparently that your wife Helen disagreed with slightly is the actual name of this movie, because it's called Yi Yi. Yi is one, as far as I know. Is that in Chinese or is that in a different language that Yi is one?
Chinese, yeah.
That's in Chinese. The name that shows up on the title card of this movie when you watch it is a 1 and a 2. That is what it is, because you have like the first one and then the second one, those like horizontal lines put together. A YouTube video essay that I watched from someone who also lives in Taiwan, this is what they said. It's like why this movie works on a couple different levels just from the name of it is that that's also a way to talk about marriage or a relationship where it's like you are individually ones, but together you're a two. Um, I don't know if that's subtext that we can throw into there, but that is also partly why this movie is called the way it is.
Yeah, the only thing I can add is I have failed miserably so many times at learning Chinese, but to that point, and if this is, I think it finishes at 3, but 1 is a single horizontal line, 2 is 2 horizontal lines, and 3 is 3 horizontal lines. They have
Mhm.
different lengths.
Yeah.
And after that, the characters become their own
Yeah.
setup, which is why I turned to her, presumably, and asked her about the English translation because it comes up in the subtitles 1 and 2. And she just gave me this look like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I think from an artistic, metaphorical sense, I could totally see movie nerds reading into that, and Edward Yang reading it, like wanting that to be interpretive. But um,
Mhm.
as a snap judgment, wife was like, I don't even know why it's called Yi. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Is there anything else that she picked up on that was like uniquely Taiwanese cultural related that maybe you or and I would not pick up on at all?
Um, yeah, she came to Canada in the 80s. So I think that she really identified with some of the have things that were occurring to this family, which may likely not still hold true because now we're in
Sure.
the 2020s. But so, for example, one of the things she talked about was there's a small scene where it turns out crazy neighbor's friend's mother gets excited when she sees her in a school jacket and says, "Oh, you go to this whatever preparatory academy." And that's, I mean, this is an Asian thing in general, but the school in that era was more famous than anything. People would move. I think Canada
Mhm.
has something similar. So um, it says the best high school in Taiwan, and the school is famous. So she says that school is actually famous even when she lived in Taiwan. The name of that particular school in Taipei. Um, so in Taiwan, you go to school based on your test results, and it doesn't matter necessarily where you live. So if you are considered a smart person, then you get to go to the smart person school. Um, and then the only other thing she talked about, which is that you can tell it visually that schools in Asia are different. So, like with the principal wielding a
Yeah.
large stick and being
Sure.
an asshole, that is a trope. And my parents in Korea too would talk a lot about what teachers were allowed to do. I think we have that a little bit in historical times, but this is the 90s. So it was quite prevalent. I have a suspicion it's still a little bit more prevalent to be a little bit cruel. Um, Academics in developing countries is such a priority.
Mhm.
The only other nuance that she picked up on, which I kind of know about, is that there are 2 languages spoken in Taiwan. So typically the main language is Mandarin, but there's a traditional Taiwanese, I can't remember what it's called, and not a lot of people use it. But she noted that the main character and his ex-girlfriend, when they meet in the elevator, they're actually speaking Taiwanese to each other. And it's
Oh,
only in
okay.
that moment which kind of she perked up and she's like, why are they speaking? So we were starting to guess that maybe they had a farmer rural background because she says that's where it's more prevalent, but
Yeah.
they never bring it up again, and they end up switching over to traditional Mandarin after, which I think is a interesting thing. I don't know if the video essay expanded on this point, but
No, but I
there's an
think that
intentional choice there.
oh yeah, I think that's an interesting choice that I absolutely would not have picked up on, but probably people in Taiwan absolutely would, which is like they definitely have a history then. And we don't have to explicitly be like say it out loud. Like they can pick up on it right away and know what's going on. I also love movies that have like 3 or 4 different languages being spoken. Because even this one has English for a while that the
And
characters are
some
speaking,
Japanese,
because
and yep.
the
Yep.
Japanese and Taiwan person, like that's the only language they both can speak. So there's
Um,
some cool stuff going on. Um, I just want to. What's interesting about this movie too, having come off talking about the movies of 1999 so much, because this is contemporary to the year 2000. It's so funny seeing them go to the movie theaters and seeing like all the posters of movies we've talked about on this podcast,
yeah.
which is fun. I really want to know the movie that they were actually talking about that they went and saw, and see if we agree with their assessment.
Well, we did see Star Wars Episode One: The Phantom Menace, I think,
I
in one
believe
of the.
you mean Star Wars : Episode 1 dash The Phantom Menace. Yes.
Yeah, there was a poster of that movie in one of the scenes. Yeah, great.
Um, do you have any sense of what the father is doing? I mean, like, what is his job? What is this company that he's a part of?
It looks like a video game development company,
I thought
and the
so
way,
too, but
yeah,
it seems so, I don't know. It seemed weird, like the jobs that he was being asked to do.
I mean, yeah, and we don't know how this world works, but as we talked off mic, Helen and I were watching Big
Mhm.
on New Year's Eve several weeks ago, I
Simple. So
think.
yeah.
uh, and even that, like the depiction of what a toy company looks like from the inside, is so opposite of what you expect a toy company. So I think there's a nuance. I think too, Taiwan at this point is going through an economic restructuring. The way they talk about knockoff brands and how these things are developed. So, um, we have these images like Apple TV had Mythic Quest. So you have this image of the American video game studio where it's like this
Yeah.
hub and everybody's yelling at each other and playing video games. I don't think that's how the '90s worked, and it felt like a bit of a dry office environment. But
Well, yeah, and this would have been kind of coming into like the first internet bubble too, right? Where like so
right,
many companies were coming in and failed. Like they're talking about like AOL and some other companies that they're talking about. What I found fascinating though is that there's a character who's like, we're moving into content. Content is the
yeah,
next thing that we're moving into.
yeah.
And it's like, boy, that is going to become even more relevant in 20 years when that's just like, we have to do content. Content is the most important thing.
Well, it gives you also insight that you know we talked about this in '99. People knew, in a sense, what was coming. It was just whether or not you could catch the wave, right? Like when
Mhm.
Google came out, there were so many search engines. Whatever it is that they did to win that war, it's not like they were the only ones who knew that that was where
What was
this
coming.
money was going to be. It's just Alta Vista and fucking whatever. They all just sucked at it. So um, yeah,
Right.
so this is a world where I think it's a computer game company. I can't remember the Japanese character's name, but he's a video game designer who wants to get away from the norm and build a content-based sort of like immersive experience. So
Mhm.
I don't think they're programmers per se, but looking actually at where these director and the actor come from educationally, they were programmers and they were electrical engineers. So they may have insight into that world as it was in Taiwan at the time too,
Yeah.
because it's supposed to be a game company. It doesn't feel fun. Yeah,
No, it certainly doesn't. Jennifer Hall is in our comment section here because we're live streaming on YouTube. I don't know how like light speed works where we're at, but she is tuning in while we're talking.
it's the
Uh,
future.
she says she has never heard of this film. Looks like it made almost $1 million, but I don't watch movies that earn less than $1 billion. So,
Oh
so
man,
that's her comment on that.
it's awful.
There's just a few things that I've written down in my notes that I just want to like tick off here. Number one, she did actually forget to take the garbage downstairs, so she might be the reason that her grandmother
Asshole.
collapsed.
Okay,
But I just noticed
karma,
that
man.
because she ties up and then puts it down, stares at the boy like down from the balcony, and then she leaves without taking the garbage with her. And I noticed that the first time, I was like, "You said you were going to take the garbage out, and you certainly did not."
Oh, Sherlock.
I think there's some comments that characters state that like really feed into this theme that the movie's trying to like portray about like how I think meaning works over time. Like it's like I hated my father's music until I fell in love with somebody, and then it meant something to me. Like those lyrics actually meant something to me. Um, of course, the kid's saying like, I can't see what you see, you can't see what I see. But I love how that ties into the photos that he takes at the end, where it's just taking photos of the back
Those
of people's
pictures
heads.
are so beautiful.
Well, they're beautiful, but when they first start flipping through them, it's like, that's also what a serial killer would do. It's
Yeah.
like
Well,
pictures of the backs of his victims' heads, and then
there was
collecting it.
we found this old. I don't remember if you like they still kind of make them, but they used to make these quote unquote indestructible cameras, point and shoot digital cameras. So we had bought this one for our honeymoon, and we found it when Emerson was about 2. It
Right.
was like this little front panel sliding Sony. And for the 3 months he had it before he broke the unbreakable camera, the pictures he was taking, much like this, I mean, they weren't singular and intentional the way this kid, because this kid's like a Buddha in this movie, but
Right.
just even getting an angle of what a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old sees is, I mean, that's the power of photography.
Well, he'd have to be at least 5 or 6 going to school, would he not?
Oh no, I'm talking about my son. Yeah.
Oh, your son. Gotcha.
Yeah, this kid is probably in grade 2 or something, because I think he's supposed to be small, just like his dad. Like it became so intentional, all the parallels, that his dad is not a tall person. The woman that who's obsessed with him is quite a bit taller than him visually. So he like, to have that consciousness. He's probably 10. Even. I think they give him a number. Isn't it like so. 10 or something? Doesn't matter.
Also, this also points to the vast difference between Western films versus European or Asian films. Because I noticed this. I was watching, her name is Celine something with an S. She directed The Portrait of a Lady on Fire here this last year, or 2 years ago, I guess now. And I watched all the rest of her films because, again, they're all on the Criterion channel. And there is a movie where a 13, 14-year-old girl is like fully nude for like a couple seconds on film. I'm like, ooh, you would not see that in a Western film. Like, straight up would not happen. And in this film, you have like a 10-year-old boy who is naked also for like a couple seconds before he like puts his towel back on. I was like, oh, also something that would never happen in a Western film. Like, there would just be so many people on you. Like, there's close down production if that happened.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, that's a thing about North American puritanical culture that it's what gives rise to cancel culture right now. It's this idea that you set an ideal that everybody else has to obey, otherwise you're the devil. Like, literally, you will go to hell. So while I am not a proponent of more child full frontal
I think
nudity,
that's exactly what you're saying. You want more kid nudity in our films. Is what
I think that everything has to be done in context, right? I mean, I don't know.
Neither this movie or the movie I'm referring to is it gratuitous in any way.
No.
It's not sexualized in any way. It's
actually
it's
quite
something
adorable.
that happens in the scene.
Yeah, I mean, we had a giggle because Emerson used to do that all the time. I mean, he still does that sometimes.
My nephew does this all the time. Like, he has a bath at my parents' place because he just always gets dirty out on the farm, and he's like jumping and running around. It's like, dude, like, just put a towel on. Like, what's
he's like, look at my butt, look at my butt, and I'm like, I don't want to look at your butt. Just put on some underwear. And he's like, butt. What is this life that I've chosen for myself, Kyle?
Really.
But and there are lines. I mean, look at the recut of The Professional, Leon.
Mm-hmm.
Because the American audience, I don't know if that was a Weinstein movie, but they wouldn't have appreciated that Natalie Portman actually is falling in love with Leon. That's a weird concept, but I don't know. It happened. Deal with it, America.
To that point, I was just going to say, like, at that kid's age, I know 100% I probably would not know what a condom is. So I felt like...
Was it even a condom, or was it just
it was just
being
a balloon.
An asshole? Yeah, he was just being an asshole.
Yeah, he's just being an asshole. It's just a balloon that he has. But it's like, I don't know what a condom is. I'm like, I also probably wouldn't know at 9 or 10 what a condom was. Not until junior high would I have known what a condom was.
I love this kid's character, that he's... I mean, he's a Buddha, but he's also so driven and scientific. When he's trying to fill the water balloon with water, and he's using all these different techniques, or like when he's teaching himself how to swim by holding his breath in his sink. Yeah, I mean, I loved all of those little things because they're so, I don't know. There's a lot of power in that.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing. I don't know if the filmmakers are intentionally playing with this idea, but the other thing that made me the other thing that reminded me of Boyhood is that in Boyhood, there's this scene where the kids are playing with like this circular saw and they throw it into the drywall. And it's like, oh, this is an American film. So obviously one of these kids is gonna get impaled by this saw. There's gonna be a bunch of blood, and that's gonna be part of like the issue he has to live with. And then nothing happens. Like there's just a tension in that scene because it's like obviously the saw is gonna get thrown into somebody. And then nothing happens. And in this film, like he jumps off and you hear him like gurgle for a bit. I'm like, oh, he's
We thought
drowning.
he died.
He's
Yeah.
gonna die.
Yep.
And I totally thought that's what the movie was going to go to. And then he walks in like totally drenched. So like, oh, you got rained on.
Smiling, having a
it's
great
like, of
day.
course, yeah, you're having a great day. So it's like they play around with like that, just like the beauty of human life, where it's like there is no 3-act structure to like our lives necessarily. So things just kind of weave in and out of being meaningful or not. And I thought that was pretty beautiful by the end of it. Same thing with the disconnect between like the daughter and the boyfriend, who's like a huge piece of shit. But regardless, they had that conversation where he's like, oh, movies mean so much, which like would be totally me at that age, by the way. But
I mean, at that age, I mean, this is why
we're doing a podcast. Yeah, that's right. But she's like, who needs movies? Just stay at home and live life. I'm like, yeah, that's probably better advice than to get wrapped up into stuff like that. But
I thought that was such a beautiful debate, and I think I agree with both of them. I think even with my photography, I talk about this in my other podcast. I think if you spend your whole life with your camera in your hand, just trying to see the world through your viewfinder, you're missing something. And if you spend your whole life without that, you might miss something too. And then this idea that fiction, reading, movies has this ability to create empathy. I think that's a powerful thing that has been lost in our world. We've lost the ability to connect forms of art with something spiritual and experiential and wholesome. We just want pleasure. We want something visceral, and we want to leave and not think about
I agree with that. And that's part of the worst thing about, like, I love this movie. And at the same time, like, I know that for 95% of people, I could not actually recommend them watching this, because it's like they're gonna be bored after 5 minutes that nothing has happened and shut it off, because they're gonna look at it like, this is 2 hours and 45 minutes left that I have to watch, sort of thing.
Helen turned away like 20 minutes in. I already saw her on her phone. But A, because I wouldn't turn off, and B, by the end she was in it, because if you have the patience to get through the fact that this is not a Hollywood blockbuster, this becomes a philosophical work. This is
but I'm saying that I always am trepidatious of getting into this conversation, because it always is going to sound like blockbusters are the worst and they shouldn't be made. And that's not really what my position is. I'm just saying that shouldn't be the only type of film that gets made. There's a place for that in a time where I want to sit back and be like, yeah, sure, tonight is an Avengers night. I don't have to really pay attention to this movie all that much and still get something out of it. Whereas there's something like this where it's like, yeah, like this is like, put the phone in the other room, sit and watch this and meditate over it for the next 3 hours, and you are going to get something out of it, I think, by the end of it. Whether it's going to be the same thing that I get out of it, I don't know, but you're going to get something out of it.
Why can't you watch Yi Yi and then follow it up with Step Brothers? You should be able to do both.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
A perfect pairing, actually.
It's a great double feature.
Yeah, why not?
Just flip the switch.
I mean, we've talked, I guess, a bunch here about like things that have happened, but is there any other like underlying theme that you wanted to bring up about this movie?
I mean, one of the things that maybe Western audiences don't key in, I mean, I don't know if this is entirely true, but Asian culture is not just family oriented, it's like society oriented. So this is a Confucian ideology, but there are very strong structures of owing honor and allegiance and responsibility, fidelity, all the way up a chain. And so when the matriarch of the family has a stroke, it's not because she's sick or she's going to die. That is the destabilization of their family.
Right.
And we do see that by the end of the movie, how important that is. But I think if you come from an Asian world, you will immediately feel that more on an emotional level. And because it's one of the reasons why this world of individualism can have a lot of power, as we saw in the heyday of the American Republic, but is also corrupting because there's not a lot of core. And Asia is kind of the opposite. There's great familial power and social structure, but then you put a despot or a communist party on it, and fucks itself up too. But
Hmm.
there's quite a lot of energy put there that maybe assumes that. And I think that we talked about this religious thing, this Buddhistic, almost stoic idea. Like the main character, how fascinating is it how even keel he is?
Hmm.
He's like this single line throughout the whole movie where he is the least dramatic and yet the focal point of the whole narrative. So there's like one or two instances where he might get agitated, but he never overreacts to anything. And it's not that he's the hero. He doesn't actually solve anything, but they keep him and his son in this like very center line as everything starts to kind of shake. Um, the one negative I have, and this is not anyone's fault, this is just a product of the 90s and Asian upbringing. All the women are hysterical. All the men are, with the exception of Adi, who's a piece of crap. But that's also a pantomime, a character of an Asian sort of
Right.
cinema. There's always a clown and there's always a beggar. It is a little grating by the end. At least the daughter got a role where she's quite a powerful figure, but it's a little exhausting to see like the wife having to go to a convent and
Right, because you can't deal with it. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It was
Well, I
great.
mean, that was actually kind of the thing because that's almost how the movie starts, where there's someone who comes into the wedding, freaks out, she
Yeah,
does, and then there's a bridal shower that happens later on. Same thing kind of happens. The wife can't take it anymore. Like, so it seems like to be a recurring thing for that sort of, I don't know, characterization.
I mean, it's not just an Asian stereotype. I mean, that's a problematic patriarchal stereotype, but that is something that is very Asian cinema, where no matter what genre you watch, particularly in this area, you watch comedy, you watch an action movie, a gangster film, the women are always screaming and crying. It's just, I
Hmm.
mean, we saw that too in the 90s. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of good, strong writing for female
Ha-
characters.
have you seen the movie The Farewell at all?
Is that the Aquafina one?
Yes.
Yeah, we watched that. That's a good
Okay.
movie.
I only bring that up because I almost want to return to that and watch it because I was pretty like medium on that movie. But I
Mhm.
feel like now that I've learned a little bit more about some of like these small things that are happening, I think I would key on those a little bit easier on a
Yes.
rewatch of that.
I,
Um, yeah.
I will say, I mean, it's not nearly at this level, and
No,
it's
no,
not
no.
trying to say as much, but that movie has more power if you are from an Asian culture or understand some of the familial structures, why they would lie to her, why they would do this, that, and the other
Yeah.
thing. But kind of like my criticism of Soul, it's trying to be an American heartwarming story at the end. So,
Uh-huh.
it's fine. It was good. And I like Aquafina a lot.
Yeah.
This movie, that's so guttural though. I mean, I know Criterion ruins it, but it's not just that. I mean, the boyfriend. Jesus, I was not expecting,
Like a murder
as
to
that,
happen. Yeah.
yeah, as that broke apart, I was thinking, there's a lot of sexual tension. There's a lot of, they start telling the parallel story of the dad and like how he had his first sort of romantic experience. And then she's in a police station. This guy's brutally murdered their
Mhm.
teacher. And you're like, what the fuck? There's like blood handprints. And then it's so casual too. She just walks by it. And then next scene, you're like, yeah,
That's right.
this shit happens, man. So fascinating. Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, the machine has told us that we need to wrap up, but I guess before we move into our ratings, do you think this movie holds up after 21 years? And do you think it's still culturally relevant?
I don't know. I thought it was impactful for me. I think that the themes are universal, that they should be discussed. So, for example, yeah, just like empathetic human philosophical discussions about yeah, death, love, aging, regret, all of that stuff. It's all
Mhm.
in there. It's packed in at 2 at 45. But like we discussed, will someone sit through 3 hours of a near mockumentary or documentary style slow burn? I don't know. Will the themes are universal, but the structure on this is a video game company. This is not what video game companies look like
No.
anymore. This is a family. I mean, nobody in Asia lives in an apartment like that anymore. The whole time we were watching it, we thought they were an upper class
Yeah, they're supposed to be middle
trust fund.
class, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you watch the YouTube videos now, Hong Kong you pay $700,000 for our 200 square feet.
Oof.
So, there's things like that that are going to fade and date it. But I do think that if you're someone like us who's a nerd and wants to watch cinema, and we'll use that word,
Capital C cinema.
for for this grander discussion, this is a great movie, and it'll hold up. You just got to give it 40 minutes. just write it out. Just write it out, and you will be rewarded.
Well, that's what Dave and I thought. But what do you think? You can send feedback to kyleanddavevsthemachine at gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter or Instagram with the handle KDVSTM. And if you want to see the entire list of films that we've watched and the ratings we've given, you can go to our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. If you want to support us monetarily so that we can continue doing this podcast and not usher in another apocalypse, you can go to our Patreon page. There's a link in the show notes of this episode. You can support for as low as $1 per month. Of course, we do not want you to donate if it in any way causes you financial hardship. Something you can do for absolutely free is to leave a rating and review on whatever app you use for podcasts. So let's get to that rating of this movie. Dave, out of 5, what would you give this movie?
I don't know. I think, let me explain it this way. When I left our theater, as much as I enjoyed it, I thought I was going to end up in like a 4. And then as I researched, and this is the problem, contextualization, the intent of the new wave of Taiwanese cinema, that it's intentionally trying to be a slow burn and promoting their cultural thing, it goes up to a 5 because it's so successful at that. So I think I'll just split the difference and stay at a 4.5. I think this is a great movie. I don't think it's for everyone, but like we talked about with Malkovich, I think there's a lot of power in this film. So yeah, I'll go with a 4.5.
You're going to 4.5. Well, that's what I was going to give it too. Mostly
Okay,
just based on that it is that bit of a slow burn to get into the movie itself. But overall, I loved it. I mean, I have a feeling that perhaps if I revisit this again, that it probably will slowly creep up to that 5 for me. I think it's one of those slower films that I'll eventually end up absolutely loving. But that being said, because we are working on this top 250 from Letterboxd, that averages, of course, to 4.5. So it ties with one other film that is currently on our list, which is The Iron Giant. So,
Oh, yeah, it's
do you think this
than
is
the Iron
better or worse than The Iron Giant?
Better. No.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I was hoping that we'd have a bit of a fight here this
Yeah,
episode,
like
Dave.
what is it going to take for us to have some discord? It's just South Park,
Right.
I think. I don't know how we'll find a movie. Hopefully, wherever we end up next, we'll bring up something that we can start wrestling about, because I'm kind of getting tired of agreeing with you, Kyle. It's
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Great. I was trying to think of, because I know what our next film is going to be, so I was trying to think of something that could be like silent film or stay silent or something like that, and nothing would come to my head. So going on, so entering our list at the number 3 position is Yi. Well, let's find out what we are going to review here next week, Dave. Let me push this button. Oh, wow, we're going like way back in time here. We are going to be watching City Lights.
Ooh, Chaplin.
Silent film, Chaplin.
Right?
What?
Oh, my ears need a rest, so I'm excited. I'm excited to not hear anything.
That's right. It's completely silent. There's absolutely nothing that can be heard in that movie. I look forward to that. Boy, I'm just trying to figure out. Actually, have you seen City Lights before?
No.
Oh wow. Okay, so I have seen City Lights before. Have you seen any of Chaplin's films?
I don't know in their entirety. Of course, I've seen
Like
pieces, and I can
pieces.
recognize some of these moments, but I cannot tell
Oh my
you
God! Are the
definitively.
space police outside?
Oh, can you hear that? Well, it's McLeod Trail. Although not to be too jibed, because apparently a police officer got killed this morning. So.
Yeah.
We'll leave that in the edit just to make it more somber. Yeah, whoever's listening, fuck you. Don't be happy.
I'm excited. I'm a big fan of Chaplin and Buster Keaton, to be honest with you. I think there was
Yes.
some great stuff that was made in the silent era, and City Lights is one of the best. But I'm trying to think. Maybe the machine has been subtly telling us what we're going to do here with our film this week, because we talked all about the films of 1999. I guess it would make sense that we're just going to follow that up with the films of 2000. So let me try that. 2000, enter, confirm. Oh no, it
Come on,
wasn't.
Kyle.
I only have 2 chances left.
We can do better than this. We can do better. Let's
Let me think
try
about it.
one.
I'm not, no. I'm not trying any of your stupid suggestions. I'm gonna have to think about this a little bit more. Is that a Chaplin mustache you're growing, or is it just a Hitler mustache that you're growing?
Oh wow, I refuse to answer that question.
All right, we're good. We can push stop here. Thanks, everyone. And by that I mean Jen, who was viewing this. She had to jump off, and I am going to push stop here on the stream. So